The Vampire King left his wallet on the table to test the waitress. What she did next shocked him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's tale. It was another ordinary night at the Crimson Mansion, a high-end restaurant nestled in the heart of the city. The hum of conversations, the clinking of fine china, and the soft rustling of elegant dresses filled the air. Waitresses glided between tables, each striving to serve their guests with impeccable grace. Among them was Emily, a young woman with bright eyes but an exhausted soul. She was no stranger to long hours, the kind that stretched late into the night, with only a few minutes to spare for herself. Emily had been working at the Crimson Mansion for months, always striving to make ends meet, and tonight was no different. Her shift was just another chapter in the never-ending grind of life. As she weaved through the crowded dining room, Emily couldn't help but notice a figure sitting at a secluded table near the back. He was unlike any other guest, tall, dark, and commanding. His presence seemed to pull the attention of everyone around him, as though he were the center of the universe. His clothes were impeccable, the suit tailored to perfection, and the sharpness of his features only added to his imposing aura. His eyes, a piercing shade of amber, scanned the room with a calm yet unsettling intensity. He was the Vampire King, though Emily didn't know that yet. To her, he was just another wealthy patron. But his gaze followed her as she approached his table, and for a moment, she felt as if the world had slowed down. His hand rested casually on the table, and as Emily took a step closer, he made a subtle move, placing his wallet on the edge of the table. It wasn't an accidental move. No, it was deliberate, an invitation, or perhaps a test. Emily's eyes flickered to the wallet, her instincts warning her of something she couldn't quite place. She had seen her fair share of high-stakes situations, rich patrons trying to test the staff, trying to push boundaries, but something about this felt different. It was as if he was testing her, but testing her for what? Her heart skipped a beat as she stood there, faced with the choice. Most people would have taken the wallet, maybe even made a quick escape, but Emily wasn't like most people. She wasn't about to fall into some trap, no matter how tempting it might have been. She chose to leave it there, untouched, as she turned and walked away. But as she did, she couldn't shake the feeling that the man had been watching her, studying her every move. Little did she know, she had just passed the first test of many, and the Vampire King had just begun to notice her in ways she never imagined. As Emily continued her shift, the night seemed to drag on, each passing moment growing heavier than the last. The sound of silverware clinking and glasses being filled the air, but her mind was elsewhere. The Vampire King, or so she had come to call him, was seated at the same table. She couldn't shake the memory of his gaze, the way he had watched her, observed her every move as if she were some kind of puzzle waiting to be solved. Her curiosity was piqued, but she knew better than to get involved in whatever game he was playing. Still, there was something magnetic about him, something that made it difficult to focus on anything else. She pushed the thought away and forced herself to concentrate on her work. The night seemed endless, but eventually, Emily found herself standing at the back of the restaurant, leaning against a counter, taking a brief moment to catch her breath. That was when she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned, half expecting to see one of her fellow waitresses or maybe her manager, but it was him. The Vampire King. His tall frame loomed over her, his amber eyes glimmering in the soft lighting of the room. He walked past her, but his presence felt suffocating, like the air itself thickened with his energy. Emily swallowed, trying to steady her breath. He stopped just a few feet, away from her, his back to the wall. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the unspoken understanding that something was happening. Finally, he spoke. "You didn't take the wallet." His voice was smooth, deep, with a trace of something that made her skin prickle. Emily raised an eyebrow, uncertain how to respond. She had half expected him to say something about the way she had left it untouched, but she hadn't expected it to come out so casually, as if he had been testing her all along. "I don't steal," she said simply, her voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline in her veins. His lips twitched slightly, as if amused. No, you don't. You passed the test. Emily felt her heart race at his words. What test? What was he talking about? She opened her mouth to ask, but before she could, he turned his head toward her, his eyes narrowing slightly, studying her. But now, you're going to take another one. The words hung in the air like a threat, yet something in his gaze softened, just for a moment. You're a curious one, aren't you? He asked, almost as if he were talking to himself. Emily swallowed again, the words catching in her throat. She didn't know if she was angry, confused, or intrigued. She had no idea what he was implying or what kind of game he was playing, but she knew one thing. He wasn't just another guest. There was something deeper at play here, something she couldn't quite grasp. I don't know what you want from me, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She could feel her pulse quickening. You'll find out soon enough, he replied, and for a moment, there was something in his eyes, something far older than she could comprehend. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing there, lost in a sea of thoughts she couldn't unravel. That night, after her shift ended, Emily found herself unable to sleep. Her mind kept replaying the brief interaction, the weight of his gaze, and the mysterious words he had spoken. Who was he really? And what did he mean by another test? She knew that she couldn't just ignore this, couldn't just walk away from whatever this was. But the question still lingered in her mind. Was she ready to face whatever challenge he was about to set for her? The next morning, as Emily made her way to work, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change. She had no idea what the Vampire King had planned, but she couldn't help but feel drawn to the mystery. She had no choice but to face whatever came next. And deep down, she knew that this was only the beginning. I did not expect to be standing in front of the Vampire King again, especially not so soon. It had only been a day since the cryptic encounter at the restaurant. But there he was, sitting at the same secluded table, his eyes locked onto mine as though he had been waiting for me all along. My mind was still racing, trying to make sense of everything. The strange test, the cryptic words, the way he had looked at me as though I were a puzzle he had yet to solve. I had tried to put it all out of my head, to go about my normal routine. But the moment I stepped into work that evening, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to face whatever was coming next. You're late. The Vampire King's voice broke through my thoughts as I approached his table. His tone was calm, but there was something in the way he spoke that made me feel like he had already anticipated my every move. I was silent for a moment, unsure of what to say. Sorry, I finally mumbled, trying to compose myself. I had some things to take care of. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. Things? He repeated, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. Or perhaps you were running from something? I felt a chill run down my spine. Was he toying with me? Testing my every move? No, I replied, trying to hold my ground. I just had to think. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he studied me. Think about what? He asked, his voice steady but full of curiosity. About you, I said, not entirely sure where the words were coming from. The Vampire King didn't respond at first. Instead, he just continued to observe me, his amber eyes never leaving my face. There was a tense silence between us, filled only by the quiet hum of the restaurant around us. I couldn't figure out if he was truly curious or just playing some sort of game with me. Then, without warning, he stood up, his movements smooth and effortless. I flinched slightly, unsure of what to expect next. You've passed the first test, he said, his voice low and almost soothing. But there's more to come. I blinked in confusion. What did that even mean? What are you talking about? I asked, my heart racing. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past me, brushing my shoulder as he did. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of warmth through my body, but I quickly shook it off, reminding myself that he was not just any man. I know you're not just a waitress, he said, his words drifting back to me as he moved away. You're more than that, and I intend to find out just how much more. I stood there, frozen, as the weight of his words settled in. Was he saying that he knew I had something special? Something that set me apart from the others? And if so, what did he want with me? My thoughts were interrupted as he returned to his seat and gestured for me to join him. I hesitated for a moment, still unsure of his intentions. But something inside me told me I couldn't back away now. So, with a deep breath, I walked over and sat down across from him, trying my best to look calm and collected. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was calculated, as though he had already planned every move. "I want to see how far you'll go," he said simply. "I want to see what you're really capable of." His words made my pulse spike. What was he asking me to do? What kind of test was this? "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling my breath catch in my throat. "You'll find out soon enough," he replied. His voice was calm, but there was something dark behind it, something that sent a shiver down my spine. The Vampire King leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. "But for now, let's see if you can handle a little bit of danger." His words were like a challenge, and I felt my heart race even faster. What kind of danger was he talking about? I had no idea, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to stop until he had me exactly where he wanted me. The question was, could I handle whatever he was planning next? I had no idea what to expect next. The Vampire King had spoken with an air of finality, like the next test was already set in motion, and I was now an unwilling player in his game. His words echoed in my mind as I walked away from his table. "Let's see if you can handle a little bit of danger." My heart was still racing from the tension of our conversation. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of something I didn't fully understand, something that could change my life forever, for better or worse. I didn't know if I was ready for it, but there was no turning back now. The restaurant was unusually quiet that night. It was almost as if everyone knew something was about to happen. I tried to focus on my work, but my eyes kept darting back to the Vampire King. He was still seated at the same table, but now, there was a noticeable distance between us. It was as if he had somehow put up an invisible wall that I couldn't cross. He watched me, though, like he was waiting for me to make my next move. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was testing me once more, but I didn't know how. I tried to push the thoughts from my mind and focused on delivering drinks to a nearby table. But as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of him in my peripheral vision. His gaze was intense, calculating. I could feel his presence in the room, like a storm brewing just out of sight. A chill ran down my spine. I had to know what he wanted from me. I had to understand. As the evening wore on, the tension seemed to grow thicker. I could barely concentrate, my thoughts constantly drifting back to the Vampire King and his cryptic words. The other waitstaff seemed to notice my unease, but didn't say anything. They were too busy with their own tasks, probably unaware of the drama unfolding in the background. At least, that's what I hoped. I didn't want anyone to know what was happening. I didn't even know if it was real or just my imagination running wild. But the feeling that something was coming, something big, was undeniable. As the last few customers trickled out, I found myself cleaning the tables, my movements mechanical, barely registering what I was doing. I was waiting for whatever came next. And then, just as the restaurant began to empty out, I saw him again. The Vampire King stood up from his table and began walking toward me. His steps were measured, deliberate, each one bringing him closer, making my heart pound louder in my chest. When he reached me, he didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at me with those intense amber eyes that seemed to pierce through every layer of protection I had built around myself. "You've been thinking about me," he said, his voice low and almost teasing. I couldn't help but nod, the words stuck in my throat. "I can see it in your eyes," he continued, his lips curling slightly. "You want to know what this is all about, don't you?" I finally found my voice. "Yes," I breathed, barely able to form the words. "I don't understand any of this. Why are you doing this? Why me?" He studied me for a moment, as if weighing his response. "Because you're different," he said finally. "You're not like the others. You don't take what's offered to you without question. You stand your ground." I blinked in confusion. "That's it. That's why you've been testing me." His eyes softened slightly, a small flicker of something human passing through them. "No," he said, his voice softer now. "There's more to you than that. I can feel it. You're stronger than you know. And that strength is what I need." His words hung in the air like a promise, but what did it mean? I was more confused than ever, but at the same time, I couldn't deny the strange pull I felt toward him. The way he spoke, the way he seemed to understand me in a way no one else ever had. "What are you asking me to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I'm asking you to trust me," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to step into a world you don't fully understand. A world that's far more dangerous than you could ever imagine. My heart raced. I didn't know if I was ready for this, but at the same time, I couldn't walk away. And if I say no? I asked, bracing myself for whatever his answer might be. He paused, then smiled faintly. You'll say yes, he said softly, when the time is right. And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, completely unsure of what had just happened. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. I had never felt so torn. The Vampire King's words echoed in my mind as I made my way through the restaurant's empty halls after my shift. You'll say yes when the time is right. What did he mean by that? Was he toying with me? Or was this all part of some plan I didn't understand? My head was spinning, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something huge, something that could change everything. I couldn't deny that there was something about him, something magnetic, that made it impossible to just walk away. But I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever he was preparing me for. I thought about the first test, the wallet, the way he had watched me so closely. Then the second test, when he had mentioned how he could feel that I was different, that I wasn't like the others. Was I truly different? And why had he singled me out? I didn't have answers. All I had was an uneasy feeling that the questions were only going to get harder. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard his voice. It felt like he was there, just behind my eyelids, watching, waiting for me to make a decision. But I didn't have a choice, did I? The path was already set, whether I liked it or not. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual, my nerves on edge. It wasn't just the usual tension of preparing for a busy shift. No, this was different. It was as if I was walking into the lion's den, and I wasn't sure if I was going to survive or be devoured. The air inside the restaurant was thick with anticipation. The usual hum of voices and clinking silverware was absent. It was too quiet, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. And then, I saw him again. The Vampire King was seated at the same table, exactly where he had been the night before. His amber eyes caught mine immediately, and my heart skipped a beat. I couldn't look away. You've come back, he said, his voice smooth and steady. He didn't need to say anything else. His gaze was enough to make my pulse race, and I felt my legs go weak beneath me. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I had no words. I wasn't even sure what I was supposed to do, but I couldn't back down now. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and approached him. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His lips curled into a small, knowing smile. What I want, he said softly, is for you to take the next step. I didn't understand. The next step? I repeated, my voice trembling. Yes, he said, leaning forward, his eyes never leaving mine. I've been testing you, but now, I want you to make a choice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black envelope. This is your invitation, he continued, to a world you know nothing about. I stared at the envelope, my heart racing. What was he asking me to do? To join him? To step into his world? I had no idea what this world was, or what it would mean for me, but one thing was clear. I couldn't walk away now. What happens if I refuse? I asked, trying to steady my shaking hands. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and studied me, his eyes glimmering with something I couldn't quite place. If you refuse, he said slowly, then nothing changes. You continue with your life, and I disappear. But if you accept, he let the words hang in the air, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife. I felt a lump form in my throat. If I accept what? I asked. He smiled, a faint, almost predatory grin. Then you'll step into a world where nothing is as it seems, he said. A world where you're no longer just a waitress. You're someone special. I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward him, toward his world. Something inside me wanted to take that step, to find out what lay beyond this ordinary life. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to leave everything I knew behind. You don't have to decide now, he said, as though reading my thoughts. Take the time you need. But remember, the offer is only open for so long. With that, he stood, leaving the envelope on the table in front of me. When you're ready, he said, and with one last look, he turned and walked away, leaving me with a decision I wasn't sure I could make. The envelope sat there, heavy and ominous, as though it held the weight of my future inside. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the envelope. My heart raced as I wondered what was inside, what this step would mean. And as the seconds ticked by, I realized I was at a crossroads. The question was no longer if I would accept. The question was when I would be ready to step into the unknown. I spent the next few hours staring at the envelope, trying to figure out what had changed in me. When I first walked into this restaurant, I was just a waitress, living a life that was predictable, but also uninspiring. Now, everything had shifted. The Vampire King had given me an ultimatum of sorts, but it wasn't just about him. It was about me. I didn't know how long I sat there, my fingers tracing the edges of the envelope. The restaurant was practically empty now, just a few stragglers finishing up their meals. The noise of clinking plates and hushed conversations faded into the background as my thoughts consumed me. I could feel the weight of the choice before me. Should I take the step into his world, into the unknown? Or should I just walk away and keep going with the life I knew, the life I could predict? I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to calm the racing thoughts in my head. His words haunted me, the way he'd said I was special. But what did that even mean? What was this world he was talking about? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down at the unknown below, and it terrified me. I had to admit, the idea of stepping into something bigger than myself, something more than just serving food and cleaning tables, appealed to me. But was it worth the risk? Would it change me forever? The sound of a door opening brought me back to the present, and I looked up to see the Vampire King walking toward me once more. He didn't speak immediately, but his gaze never left mine. He stood in front of me, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. I could feel the pull again, the magnetic attraction that had been there since the first moment I saw him. He was the kind of man who could command the room without lifting a finger, the kind of man who could make you feel like you were the only person in the world. But there was something darker beneath the surface, something that I didn't fully understand, but knew was there. "You've had time to think," he said finally, his voice smooth and calm. "So, what's your decision?" I felt my throat tighten. I knew this moment would come, but I hadn't expected it to feel like this. I looked at the envelope again, my fingers trembling as I picked it up and held it in front of me. "What's inside?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled faintly, that same predatory grin I'd seen before. "The next step," he said. "It's all in there. But you must decide if you want it." I hesitated for a moment longer before slowly opening the envelope. Inside, there was a single piece of paper, and as I unfolded it, I read the words written in a neat, elegant script. "You are invited to a world of power and danger, a world where your destiny is no longer your own. If you choose to accept, you will never return to the life you knew. But if you refuse, you may walk away, and the offer will be gone forever." I looked up at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "And if I choose to accept?" I asked. His smile deepened, and he took a step closer to me. "Then you will come with me. You will step into a world where everything changes, where you will be more than you ever imagined. But remember, this world comes with its price." The words sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't turn back now. I was already too deep, already tangled in his world. "What's the price?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He paused for a moment, his eyes darkening. "Your loyalty," he said simply. "Your trust. And in return, you will have power beyond your wildest dreams." I took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling on my shoulders. The offer was tempting, too tempting to ignore. I had spent my life being overlooked, being nothing more than a waitress. But this was different. I could feel it in my bones. "I accept," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. He stepped back, his expression unreadable. "Good," he said softly. "You will not regret this decision." And just like that, I had crossed the line. There was no going back. The world I had known was slipping away, and a new, dangerous world was opening up before me. I didn't know what awaited me, but I knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same again. I had stepped into the unknown. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back now. The Vampire King's world was something I couldn't yet comprehend, but I knew that with every step I took, the world I knew was fading away. As I followed him through the grand hallways of the mansion, the weight of my choice hung heavily in the air. The walls around me were lined with ancient paintings, and the floors beneath my feet seemed to hum with the energy of the place. Everything about this world felt different, like it belonged to another time, another reality. We walked in silence, the only sound being the soft echo of our footsteps on the marble floors. The Vampire King led me through a series of ornate rooms, each one more extravagant than the last. Rich tapestries adorned the walls, and the smell of aged wood and candles filled the air. Finally, we arrived at a massive door, made of dark wood and carved with intricate symbols I didn't recognize. He turned to face me, his amber eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite read. "This is where it begins," he said softly, his voice carrying a sense of finality. "Inside, you will find your place." He pushed the door open, and the room beyond was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a vast chamber, with high ceilings that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness above. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate table, surrounded by chairs that looked as though they had been crafted from the finest materials. The table was covered in maps and scrolls, all depicting strange lands and symbols I couldn't decipher. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing to one of the chairs. I did as he said, my heart pounding in my chest. As I sat down, I felt a sense of gravity, as though this moment was the point of no return. The Vampire King took a seat across from me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence between us thick with anticipation. Then, without warning, he reached forward and slid a scroll toward me. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly. "This," he said, "is your first task. It will test your loyalty, your strength, and your ability to adapt to the world you've chosen." I unfurled the scroll, my eyes scanning the contents. It was a map, but not one I recognized. The lands it depicted were strange and unfamiliar, with borders that shifted and changed in ways I couldn't understand. At the top of the map were words written in an ancient script that sent a chill down my spine. "This is a map to the Underworld," he said, his voice low. "Your task is simple. You will go there, retrieve what is needed, and return. But be warned, the Underworld is not a place for the faint of heart." I looked up at him, confusion and fear mixing in my chest. "What exactly do you need me to find?" I asked, my voice shaky. He leaned back in his chair, a hint of amusement flickering in his eyes. "You'll know when you get there. The Underworld will reveal its secrets to those who are worthy." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. This wasn't what I had expected. I had thought that by accepting his offer, I would be joining a world of power and luxury, not being thrust into a dangerous mission right away. But there was no turning back now. "What happens if I fail?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His gaze turned cold, and for a moment, I saw the true danger in his eyes. "Failure is not an option," he said, his voice sharp. "If you fail, you will not return." The weight of his words settled over me like a dark cloud. I felt a surge of fear mixed with determination. This was my test, my chance to prove that I was worthy of the world I had chosen to enter. I nodded slowly, trying to steady my shaking hands. "I'll do it," I said, my voice more confident than I felt. He studied me for a moment before nodding. "Good. You leave at dawn." I stood up, the map still clutched in my hand. The gravity of what I had just agreed to was starting to sink in. The Underworld was not a place for the faint of heart, but I was no longer just a waitress. I was someone chosen for something greater. And no matter what, I wasn't going to back down now. The Vampire King had given me a chance, and I was going to take it. As I left the room, I felt a sense of purpose that I hadn't known before. I didn't know what awaited me in the Underworld, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. I woke up to the sound of the wind howling outside my small room in the mansion. It was still dark, the first light of dawn just beginning to creep through the heavy curtains. I had barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of what I was about to do. The map was still on the table beside me, its cryptic symbols and the mysterious path to the Underworld burning in my mind. I had agreed to the Vampire King's task, and now there was no turning back. As I prepared for the journey, I tried to push aside the fear gnawing at my insides. I had no idea what awaited me in the Underworld, but something deep within me told me that this would be the defining moment of my life. I dressed quickly, pulling on the simple clothes I had been given, feeling both out of place and strangely empowered by the weight of the mission. Ahead, I grabbed the map, slipping it into my bag, and made my way down the dark hallway toward the courtyard where the Vampire King had told me to meet him. The mansion was eerily quiet, the only sounds my footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls. When I stepped outside, the chill in the air hit me immediately. The sky was still a deep blue, the first signs of daylight just beginning to peek over the horizon. There, waiting for me, stood the Vampire King. His figure was silhouetted against the backdrop of the castle, his presence commanding as always. He was already dressed for the journey, his black cloak billowing slightly in the wind. His amber eyes met mine as I approached, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if we were both waiting for the other to say something, to acknowledge what was about to happen. Finally, he broke the silence. "You're ready," he said, his voice low but certain. I nodded, trying to steady my breath. "I don't know what I'm walking into," I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts to sound confident. "You'll find out soon enough," he replied, his tone calm, but with a hint of something darker beneath it. "The underworld is a place of danger, but it's also a place of power. You'll need to trust yourself, trust your instincts." I swallowed, trying to push the fear aside. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to turn back now. "I'm ready," I said again, this time with more certainty. The Vampire King nodded once, a small, approving smile on his lips. "Good," he said. "Follow me." He turned and began walking toward the edge of the courtyard, where a large, ornate door stood. The door was unlike anything I had ever seen before, carved with intricate symbols and glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. As we approached, the door creaked open on its own, revealing a dark tunnel beyond. The air that rushed out from the tunnel was cool and smelled of earth, ancient stone, and something metallic. I hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, following the Vampire King into the unknown. The door slammed shut behind us with a final, deafening thud, and the world outside was gone. The tunnel was narrow, the walls covered in strange, glowing runes that seemed to pulse with energy as we walked deeper into the darkness. The Vampire King led the way, his steps sure and confident, while I struggled to keep up. My heart was pounding in my chest, the uncertainty of the journey pressing down on me with every step. "How far is it?" I asked, trying to break the silence. "Not far," he said, his voice echoing off the walls. "But time works differently here. What feels like hours on the outside could be mere minutes in here." I nodded, trying to make sense of his words. It was hard to focus on anything other than the growing sense of unease gnawing at me. Every inch of this place felt wrong, like it was alive with something ancient and powerful. The deeper we went, the darker it became, until the only light was the faint glow from the runes on the walls. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, we reached the end of the tunnel. Before us stood a massive stone door, even larger than the one we had passed through. The Vampire King stepped forward and placed his hand on the door, muttering something in a language I couldn't understand. The door rumbled, and slowly, it began to open. What lay beyond it was a sight I could never have prepared for. The underworld stretched out before me, a vast, desolate landscape, with jagged cliffs and swirling, dark clouds overhead. The ground beneath my feet was cracked and dry, and the air felt thick with tension. I could hear distant howls, the sounds of something alive, but far away. The Vampire King turned to face me, his expression serious. "This is where your journey begins," he said. "Be careful, trust your instincts, and remember that not everything here is as it seems." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what to expect. I had never been anywhere like this before, and the overwhelming sense of danger was unlike anything I had ever felt. "Are you coming with me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King's amber eyes gleamed in the dim light. "No," he said, his voice firm. "This is your task. You must face it alone." And with that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me standing at the edge of the underworld, unsure of what would happen next. But one thing was clear, this was only the beginning. I stood at the threshold of the underworld, the weight of my decision pressing down on me like a stone lodged in my chest. The Vampire King had given me my task, and now it was time to face the reality of what lay beyond. The air was thick, heavy with an ancient energy that made my skin tingle. I could hear distant echoes, cries that seemed to come from the very walls of this cursed place. My heart pounded as I took my first step into the darkness. The ground was uneven beneath my feet, sharp rocks and broken earth crunching with every movement. The world here was a twisted version of reality, as if time itself had lost all meaning. The sky above was a swirling mix of dark clouds and flashes of eerie, purple light. It felt like I had entered a realm where everything was out of balance. My breath quickened as I walked forward, the silence around me so absolute it was deafening. Every step I took felt like it was leading me deeper into the unknown, and I couldn't help but wonder if I was making a mistake. What had I gotten myself into? The Vampire King's words echoed in my mind. Trust your instincts. That's what he had said. But how could I trust myself when everything here seemed wrong? When I had no idea what I was walking into? I tried to steady my nerves as I ventured further, the landscape stretching out before me, barren and lifeless. The ground beneath me felt cold, as if the earth itself had been drained of warmth. The air was stagnant, heavy, and the only sound I could hear was the crunch of my boots on the cracked earth. As I walked, I became aware of the feeling of eyes on me, watching from the shadows. I turned quickly, my heart racing, but there was nothing there. I took another step, and then another, but the sensation wouldn't go away. It felt as though the very land itself was alive, and it was waiting for me to make a mistake. Then I heard it. A whisper. Soft at first, like the wind rustling through dead leaves, but growing louder with each passing second. You shouldn't be here. The voice was cold, distant, but unmistakable. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Who's there? I called out, my voice trembling slightly. The whisper came again, this time louder, clearer. You should turn back. My hands shook as I gripped the map the Vampire King had given me. I looked around, but there was no one in sight. The voice had no source, yet it felt like it was coming from all around me, echoing in the very air. I can't turn back, I said to myself, more to calm my nerves than anything else. I have to do this. But the voice was insistent, growing louder. Turn back. You're not ready. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The Vampire King had given me a task, and I would complete it, no matter how dangerous it seemed. But as I pressed on, the voice began to change. It wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was a low, guttural growl, filled with malice. You will regret this, it warned. I quickened my pace, my mind racing. I couldn't let the fear take over. I had to keep moving. As I walked, the landscape around me seemed to shift, the ground beneath my feet cracking and shifting with each step. The walls of the canyon I was walking through seemed to close in on me, as if the world itself was closing off my escape. I had to move faster, I had to keep going, but the fear was starting to consume me. And then, suddenly, I saw it. The first sign of life in this desolate place. A shadow moved in the distance, just at the edge of my vision. I stopped, my heart racing. The shadow shifted again, moving closer. I couldn't see what it was, but the presence felt wrong. It was not like the shadows I had seen before. This was something darker, something more sinister. I couldn't wait any longer. I started running, my breath coming in short gasps, my mind focused on putting as much distance between me and whatever that shadow was. But no matter how fast I ran, it seemed to follow. The whispers grew louder in my ears, the growling now a constant roar in my head. You can't escape, the voice taunted. You are already lost. I stumbled over the uneven ground, barely able to keep my balance. The air grew colder, and I could feel the darkness pressing in on me. I was nearing the edge of the canyon now, but I couldn't see what was ahead. The shadows loomed around me, dark and oppressive. I had no choice but to keep running. But the sound of something following me, something just out of reach, made my heart race even faster. I looked over my shoulder, but the shadows were too thick, too dark to see anything clearly. All I knew was that I was not alone. And as I ran, I could feel the weight of the task ahead of me growing heavier with every step. The underworld had already begun to show its true face, and I had no idea if I would survive whatever lay ahead. I ran as fast as I could, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the pounding of my heart in my chest drowning out the whispers and the growls that seemed to be closing in around me. The shadows, dark and oppressive, stretched out in all directions, but I couldn't afford to look back. I needed to keep moving, to escape whatever was hunting me. I felt the temperature drop with every step I took, and the ground beneath me became more unstable. Jagged rocks rose from the earth, threatening to trip me at every turn, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't afford to stumble. The whispering voice grew louder, more insistent. You can't run forever, it taunted. You're already trapped. My pulse quickened as the air around me thickened. The voice felt like it was inside my head now, its chilling words reverberating in my mind. You are not the first to enter the underworld, it whispered. And you won't be the last to fail. I clenched my fists, trying to block out the voice. The Vampire King had told me to trust my instincts, to be strong. But how could I when the very land itself seemed to be working against me? I couldn't see what was chasing me, but I could feel it closing in. The air was thick with darkness, and the shadows pressed in like a living thing. I reached the edge of the canyon, the ground sloping steeply down into a vast, chasm-like pit below. The air seemed to tremble with energy, and I realized that this was no ordinary place. This was the heart of the underworld. The thought hit me like a punch to the stomach. I was standing at the threshold of something ancient and dangerous, something far beyond what I had ever imagined. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had to make a choice. The only way forward was down, into the abyss. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the descent. As I moved closer to the edge, the wind howled in my ears, as if warning me to turn back. But I couldn't. Not now. Not after everything I had already endured. The moment my foot left the edge, I felt myself falling. My stomach lurched as I plummeted into the darkness, the wind rushing past me so fast it nearly stole my breath away. I kept my eyes open, watching as the jagged rocks and craggy walls of the canyon blurred past me, the landscape below spinning out of control. I could feel the pull of the underworld's gravity, the weight of its power dragging me deeper into its depths. It felt like I was falling forever. But then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I landed. The impact sent a shockwave of pain through my body, but I managed to roll with it, hitting the ground hard but staying on my feet. I staggered, my legs wobbling beneath me as I tried to regain my balance. The air was thick and heavy, and the stench of decay filled my nostrils. The ground beneath me was uneven, the rocks sharp and jagged, but I couldn't focus on the pain. I had to keep moving. The underworld had already shown me its dark side, but I had no choice now but to push forward. I glanced around, trying to get my bearings. The area around me was bleak and desolate, a twisted reflection of the world above. Strange, twisted trees with gnarled roots twisted into the earth, their branches reaching up like skeletal fingers. The ground was covered in a strange, blackened moss that crunched beneath my boots. The sky above was no longer purple, but a sickly shade of green, casting an eerie glow over everything. The whispers still echoed in my mind, though they were fainter now, as if they were fading into the distance. I tried to ignore them, focusing instead on the path ahead. I didn't know where I was going, but I had no other choice but to keep moving. The task the Vampire King had set for me was clear now. I had to find whatever it was that was hidden in the underworld, and I had to retrieve it. But what was it? What did I need to find? And why had he sent me here alone? As I moved deeper into the underworld, the silence around me was deafening. The world felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I walked for what felt like hours, the landscape shifting with each step I took. The twisted trees seemed to grow closer together, blocking out the little light that filtered through the green sky. I could feel the weight of the place pressing down on me, the oppressive darkness seeming to close in around me. Suddenly, I heard a sound. A low, rumbling growl. It was distant at first, but it grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was right behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, but there was nothing there. Just the endless darkness of the underworld. My mind was playing tricks on me. I took another step, but the growl came again, this time much closer. It was no illusion. I wasn't alone. Something was stalking me in the shadows. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat as the growl echoed through the oppressive silence of the underworld. I had only taken a few steps forward when I realized I wasn't alone. My heart was hammering in my chest, the sound drowning out everything else. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but my legs refused to move. The growl was louder now, closer, and I could feel the air shift around me, thick with a presence I couldn't see. I turned around slowly, scanning the darkness that surrounded me, but all I saw were the twisted trees and the shifting shadows. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. The underworld was full of dangers, I knew that much. But what I didn't know was what kind of creature lurked in the shadows, waiting for me to make a mistake. The growl came again, more distinct this time, and I whipped around, my eyes wide with fear. There, in the corner of my vision, I saw it. A pair of glowing yellow eyes, peering out from the darkness. They were low to the ground, watching me, waiting. And then I saw its shape, a hulking, monstrous figure, its fur matted and dark, its claws digging into the earth like a predator ready to pounce. My breath hitched as I realized what it was. A beast, a creature straight out of nightmare, its jagged teeth bared in a snarl. It was huge, its body towering over me, the muscles rippling beneath its thick fur. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the fear it saw in my eyes. The whispers that had been haunting me now grew louder, their tone mocking and cold. "You can't outrun it," they hissed. "You can't escape." Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, my foot catching on a rock. I fell to the ground, scraping my hands against the rough surface of the underworld floor. But I didn't have time to dwell on the pain. The beast was moving toward me, its massive paws shaking the ground with every step. I scrambled to my feet, my body trembling as I tried to make sense of what I was supposed to do. I had no weapons, no tools to defend myself. I was alone in this desolate place, facing something far stronger than me. I thought of the Vampire King's words, "Trust your instincts." Was this what he meant? Was this part of the test? Or was this just a nightmare, something I wasn't supposed to survive? The creature was almost on top of me now, its hot breath coming in shallow bursts, the stench of decay and death thick in the air. It lunged toward me, its claws outstretched, but I didn't hesitate. I ran. My legs burned as I pushed myself to move faster, adrenaline flooding my veins. I could hear the beast behind me, its growls shaking the air, but I refused to look back. I couldn't afford to stop, couldn't afford to lose my focus. The ground beneath me seemed to shift with every step, the terrain uneven and treacherous. I could feel the pull of the underworld's energy, trying to slow me down, to drag me into its depths. But I kept running, my feet pounding against the cracked earth, the shadows closing in around me. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't let myself be caught. The creature's growls echoed through the air, closer now, louder, as though it was right behind me. I could hear its breath, heavy and ragged, as it chased me through the darkness. I had no choice but to keep running, my mind focused only on survival. Then, just as I thought I couldn't run any longer, I saw it. A light, faint at first, flickering in the distance. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me hope. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the sharp rocks digging into my skin, the pain of exhaustion taking hold. The growl behind me was louder now, a roar that shook the ground beneath my feet, but I couldn't stop. I was so close. I reached the light, and as I stumbled into its glow, I saw what it was. A door, ancient and covered in strange markings, its surface glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. It was a doorway, a way out, but it wasn't just a door. It was a barrier, a way to protect me from the creature that was still chasing me. I reached for the door, my fingers trembling as I touched the cool surface. I didn't know how to open it, didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. It was my only chance. The beast was almost upon me, its claws reaching for my back, but I didn't stop. With every ounce of strength left in me, I pushed against the door. And then, it opened. The air around me shifted as the door swung wide, revealing a new path, one I couldn't see clearly, but felt a strange pull toward. I stepped through the door, the growl of the beast fading as I crossed the threshold. The door slammed shut behind me, and for the first time since I had entered the underworld, I could hear nothing but silence. But the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like a warning. The path before me was unclear, the way forward hidden in shadow. But I had no choice now. I had to keep moving, and this new place, whatever it was my next step. What lay ahead? I didn't know, but I couldn't stop now. The underworld had already shown me its dangers, and I was far from finished. I stood in front of the door, the cool, otherworldly light still flickering softly from the strange markings on its surface. The sounds of the underworld, the growls, the whispers, the crashing of unseen forces, faded behind me as I stepped through. But silence filled the space beyond, and it wasn't comforting. The air felt heavier, colder. I could feel the energy of this place, thick and dense, pushing down on me with every breath. My footsteps echoed on the ground beneath me, a stark contrast to the oppressive quiet that surrounded me. This new world, if you could even call it that, felt more alien than the one I had just left. It was like I had crossed into a realm that existed outside of time itself, somewhere between worlds. The walls around me were smooth, almost metallic, but dark, like the reflection of a nightmare. Everything here seemed unnatural, like it was built to trap you, to confuse you, to keep you lost. The path stretched before me, uncertain and shrouded in shadow, but I knew that I had to follow it. There was no turning back now. As I moved deeper into this strange place, the sense of being watched intensified. My skin prickled, and every instinct told me that I wasn't alone. I could hear something faintly in the distance, footsteps, a dragging sound, like something moving slowly, deliberately. I stopped, straining my ears to listen. It was so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat, steady but quick. And then, there it was again, the sound of footsteps, closer now, echoing in the vast, empty space. I turned around, my breath shallow, expecting to see something, or someone, but the corridor was empty. My heart began to race. Had I imagined it? Or was it something else? I couldn't afford to second-guess myself, not here. I pushed forward, my eyes darting from side to side as I walked, trying to make sense of the darkness. Then, suddenly, a shadow moved across the wall. I froze, my body tensing. The shadow was large, stretching across the walls like something alive. It darted across my path, moving faster than my eyes could follow. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest, but nothing appeared. There was no creature, no figure, only the stillness of the corridor. My mind was playing tricks on me. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe the underworld had a way of making you doubt your senses, making you question what was real. I took another step, then another, my footsteps quiet against the floor. The further I walked, the more oppressive the silence became, and the more I felt like something was watching, waiting. The atmosphere here was suffocating, like the very air was thick with unseen dangers. The walls felt like they were closing in, narrowing the path until it seemed there was no way forward. And yet, there was something driving me to continue. A pull, an invisible force, like a thread leading me deeper into the heart of this place. I reached out, running my fingers along the smooth, cold wall, trying to ground myself, but the sensation of being watched grew stronger. Suddenly, there was a low sound, a rumble, deep and resonant, coming from far away, like the growl of some ancient creature. My pulse quickened, and for the first time, I felt a real surge of fear. The rumbling grew louder, closer, and I realized with a start that it wasn't just a growl. It was something else, something powerful, shaking the ground beneath me. The corridor seemed to tremble, and I stumbled, my hand bracing against the wall to steady myself. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew I had to be ready. The sound continued to grow, a wave of raw power moving toward me. I took off running, my legs burning as I sprinted down the path. The rumbling followed, growing louder and faster, until it seemed as if the ground itself would split open beneath my feet. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up, but I couldn't stop. The fear was too great. The creature, or whatever it was closing in, and I could feel it breathing down my neck. Just when I thought I couldn't run any longer, I saw a flicker of light in the distance. Another door, this time bathed in an eerie green glow. It was my only chance. I ran toward it, my heart racing. The growl behind me was almost deafening now, but I didn't look back. I reached the door and threw myself at it, slamming my hand against the cold metal. It didn't budge. Panic surged in my chest as I pulled at the door, desperate to escape, but the thing behind me was almost here. I could feel it, its presence, its power. And then, just as I thought I was going to be crushed by whatever was coming for me, the door swung open. Without thinking, I dove through, just in time to hear the creature's growl echo behind me. I landed hard on the ground, gasping for breath, my hands shaking as I looked around. I had made it through. For now. But the danger wasn't over. I had no idea what lay beyond this door, but I knew that I was no longer in control. This was the underworld, and I was at its mercy. I stepped through the door and into a new, unfamiliar world. The air was cooler here, though the oppressive feeling from the underworld lingered, tightening around my chest like a vice. I could feel the weight of everything, my decisions, my survival, my next steps, pressing down on me. The door closed behind me with a soft thud, sealing off the path I had just come from. For a moment, all I could do was stand there, taking in the strange surroundings. This place was unlike anything I had encountered before. The walls were made of smooth stone, and a faint glow seemed to come from deep within the rock itself. The atmosphere was dense with a strange energy, like a pulse that resonated through my entire body. As I took a tentative step forward, the floor beneath me was cold, smooth, and unyielding. I glanced around, hoping for some sign of what I was supposed to do, but all I saw was darkness. No shadows or monsters followed me in here, only the quiet hum of the air and the eerie glow coming from the walls. The silence was suffocating. A part of me wanted to turn back, to return to the chaos and danger of the underworld where everything was familiar, but I knew that wasn't an option anymore. I had made my choice, and this was the only way forward. Keep going, I whispered to myself, the words sounding hollow in the vast emptiness around me. I walked forward, my footsteps echoing through the quiet. As I moved deeper into this strange new space, I felt the strange sensation of being drawn towards something. It was subtle at first, a slight tug at the back of my mind, but it grew stronger with each step. It was as if the very place itself was calling me, guiding me towards something I couldn't yet see. My heart beat faster, and my senses heightened. There was something ahead, something waiting for me. I didn't know what it was, but I had to find it. The air around me seemed to shift as I walked, growing colder, more intense. The strange glow from the walls flickered in a rhythmic pattern, and I realized I was not alone. As I moved forward, I saw something in the distance. A figure, standing motionless in the middle of the path. It was tall and cloaked in shadow, its features obscured by the dark folds of its garment. I stopped, uncertainty flooding my chest. My breath caught in my throat. Was this another test? A threat? The figure didn't move, but I could feel its presence, an intense energy that seemed to radiate from it like a storm waiting to break. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling at my sides. Who are you? I asked, my voice a shaky whisper. The figure remained still, but I could feel its attention focused on me. It felt as though the entire world had frozen in that moment. I took a cautious step forward, my feet making soft noises against the cold stone floor. The figure finally spoke, its voice low and ancient. You have come far, but you are not yet where you need to be, it said, its words like a slow, deliberate echo. You seek something, but you do not understand what you are truly after. My heart raced as the figure's words sank in. What did it mean? I wasn't sure what it was talking about, but I could feel a truth in its words that resonated deep within me. I had come here to complete the task the Vampire King had set for me, but I had no idea what the end result would be. What was I truly searching for? The figure stepped forward, its movements fluid and precise, like it was made from the very shadows. I felt a surge of fear, but I didn't back away. This was my journey, and I had to face whatever it was head-on. What do you want from me? I asked, trying to steady my voice. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if contemplating my question. It is not what I want from you, it said slowly. It is what you are willing to give. The words echoed in my mind, and I felt the weight of them settle in my chest. What was I willing to give? I had already given so much of myself to this world. My trust, my strength, my resolve. But this felt different. This felt like something deeper, something I couldn't quite understand. What do you mean? I asked, my voice almost pleading. The figure took another step closer, and I instinctively stepped back. What are you truly seeking? It asked, its voice now softer, almost a whisper. I thought for a moment, my mind racing through all the reasons I had come here, through all the events that had led me to this point. Power? Freedom? Something more than what I had before. Was that all I was seeking? Was there more to this journey than just completing a task for the Vampire King? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question pressing down on me. I don't know, I admitted. I thought I knew what I wanted, but now, I'm not so sure. The figure nodded, as if it had been expecting this answer. Then you must decide, it said, its voice growing fainter. The path you choose will define you. But remember, what you seek may not always be what you find. With those final words, the figure faded into the shadows, leaving me standing alone in the cold, glowing corridor. I was no closer to understanding what this world was, or what my place in it would be, but one thing was clear. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning.